Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Yes, so today is January 24th, Sunday, and 2021, New Year. And we're talking today about, um, let me look at our title. I know what we're talking about, but we're talking about looking ahead. How do we then communicate?
How do we talk to each other?
Looking ahead, yes. So it is a new year. It is a new day. It is new in so many wonderful ways. I would like to start by doing a reading, and it's today's reading in Ernest Holmes, our founder's inspirational daily guides 365. So this is the one for the 24th of January, and it's called I Accept My Individuality. The Bible quote is from 1 Corinthians 12:4. Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord. So he says, Ernest Holmes says, it is right and necessary that we should be individuals. If two persons were exactly alike, one would be unnecessary in the scheme of things. Emerson said that imitation is suicide. The divine spirit never made any two alike. No two rose bushes, no two snowflakes, two grains of sand, nor two persons. We are all just a little unique, for each wears a different face, but behind each is the one divine presence, God. Unity does not mean uniformity. Unity means that everything draws its strength, its power, and its ability to live from one source. One life does flow through everything, but this life is never monotonous. It is forever doing new things in you and in me. I affirm that I too am of this original spirit and that it is doing something new through me today. So affirm for yourself as I speak in the first person, I. I'll repeat that. I affirm that I too am of this original spirit and that it is doing something new through me today. Therefore, everything I do is original. It is a new creation. There is new enthusiasm, a new zest for life. Even the old songs I sing are different because of a renewed influx coming from the maker of all music. The divine spirit is flowing through me in an individual way, and I accept the genius of my own being. Since the original artist is doing something new through me today, I do not imitate others. Each is a king in his own right. Each is a divine being on the pathway of the eternal unfoldment. Gladly, I recognize and unite with the genius in others, but always keep the uniqueness of my own personality. All the presence there is flowing through me in an original manner. I invite the inspiration, the illumination, and the guidance of God and gladly cooperate with them. And so it is.
Beautiful. Beautifully written.
And we thought that was a good lead in, not just conveniently, but serendipitously for what we wanted to talk about. Because I think with where we run into problems with communicating with people is not honoring our uniqueness and our differences. And I think that's really the key. And I'm talking about specifically communicating in a way that people are glad to hear from you. People are glad you said what you said, because unfortunately, so often communication is about I'm right, you're wrong, and my job is for you to understand that you're wrong.
Right.
And
Right.
you may relate to that or remember that or think of that. Well, yeah, that was communication from my parents or my teacher or whatever, or previous spouse. But that kind of communication is not communication. It's not two-way communication. That's one-way communication, and it really just shuts the other person down instead of honoring them as their own unique person with their own unique understanding.
So one of our missions, if we decide to undertake it as a mission, is to notice the position that we're listening from. It's often an invisible position that we don't realize. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Uh, because I write an article for a magazine from a dog's point of view, I get to talk to a lot of people about dogs. And one person immediately told me in the beginning of the conversation, he said, I really don't like dogs. And so I said, well, of the dogs you don't like, what do you like? What dog might you choose if you had to choose a dog? And he thought about it, and he chose a dog that he thought he could tolerate. And so, but I want to bring to you that his whole position of looking at the different species that he might choose from was from a position of rejection, a position of
Mhm.
not liking or not approving of. We often have an unknown position of disapproval. And we find that in every area. I find it very often in spirituality, that a person will identify their spiritual orientation and automatically, without even thinking about it, it registers yes, no, good, bad, somewhere in between. I can talk to this person or I can't. And all kinds of screening goes on that I'm not necessarily aware of. And what I wanted to bring to you, to our attention, is that it's that unaware attention that is often the problem. We don't realize we're listening from a bias, we're listening from a position. And that very often when we're speaking, then we're also speaking from that position, and the other person may register that and respond to it negatively. And we don't realize why they're being negative, but they're responding to our position that we have often not stated because we're not even aware of it.
Mhm. Exactly. So, we learn to communicate usually from our family of origin, or learn to communicate or not communicate,
Which is can be
which is
good
the
news or very
problem. This
bad
is the
news. Yeah.
problem that we really aren't given any communication lessons, not even in high school. It would be nice if we were given some instruction in high school. And maybe in some high schools today they do. But we largely just go on automatic from what we learned at home. And I had, I'm very much a senior, and so of course my father's from another generation altogether. My parents were from the era of the Depression, and so um, they communicated in the style that they grew up with, which was very much a paternalistic. The husband is the boss of the household, and everybody does what he says. To the point that I never even saw any communication between him and my mother, really. They talked, but there was never much honoring of her desires or what she wanted. He pretty much decided everything, including what color the walls would be in the house. He really decided everything. And while he was very loving, and I consider him a good father because he was very loving and he was a provider, the only kind of communication that I learned from him is I talk and you listen, or he talked and I listened, and there was never an invitation for my opinion, or certainly no differences were tolerated. So my response to that is never to question authority. When someone comes across very authoritarianly and very vehemently, I become very quiet, and that in itself is a problem. That's not communicating. That's withdrawal. And so the problem with that is you're likely, if you do that, you're likely not to get your needs met because
Mhm.
the other person doesn't even know what your needs are. And you're not, I didn't have any words. I didn't know how to say it. So I loved studying psychology and learning some of the techniques and some of the things to say, which was simply like, this isn't working for me, or that doesn't work for me. That's a nice way of saying it without saying, "You're not the boss of me," which
I didn't realize that's what you were saying. You never told me that. I thought I was the boss of you. Oh, okay. So
Oh.
you learn things like that every day.
So, and also it was explained to me that there's a style of communicating that is assertive, and I had always kind of heard that in sort of a negative sense, because it's often misinterpreted when women are assertive that they're being aggressive. And so that difference was explained to me, that behavior falls on a line, and the one line of being aggressive is over here. The other line, but the opposite of aggressive, is passive. And passive is what I had been when I would not engage if someone was coming across too strongly. That's passive. You're not likely to get your needs met with either of those. But in the middle is an area called assertive. And assertive is when I honor my rights as well as honoring your rights. And I speak my truth in a calm voice and a clear voice, not crying or weeping and not yelling or shouting. Yelling or shouting is aggressive. Crying and weeping is passive. But assertive is in a normal tone voice, saying what you want or need or like or prefer.
So my question would be, what is our dialogue like internally when we're grappling with new ideas, when we're grappling with spiritual concepts, when we're grappling with how we're going to live our lives? Because I assert that we have the same kind of conversation in our head that we have with other people. So there is the position of authority that we have agreed to. We're often passive to that, and when a new idea shows up that we could entertain, we don't want to take it on. We don't want to argue with it. We don't want to be in disagreement. So we'll often avoid or not deal directly with the opportunity. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is that the style that we have on the outside is probably the same style we have on the inside
Of how we talk to
of how we talk
ourselves.
to ourselves. So we can say, I am a this. And we can say, I am a this open to the possibility of something else. Or we can say, I am a this and I have to defend this. And all of my listening and all of my arguing internally is to defend and honor that because that's the only way it can be. And so we end up then fixed in a position mentally or spiritually that we don't realize we're fixed in and we can't change. I had a conversation with somebody some time back, and I don't know, I even remember who it was, but he said something to something like, "Spirit sometimes tries to talk to me, but I don't want to listen, and because I don't want to listen because it scares me." I said, "Well, what scares you about it?" And he said, "Well, it doesn't fit my paradigm. It doesn't fit my experience. And I was told a long time ago that if spirit speaks to you, it's evil."
Mm.
So I
It's an
said, well,
evil spirit.
yeah, so well, it's an evil phenomena. You're being
Mm,
possessed.
mm,
And he had a
mm.
vocabulary for this experience that meant he couldn't listen, he couldn't consider, he couldn't be open. So we often say, this is my spiritual experience. But what we're also saying without meaning to is the doors are all closed to anything new or anything different. And the saddest part of that is that very often our spiritual awakening or our spiritual experience is very limited because it happened at a very early stage of our lives. So if you were raised in a particular theology and you have that now 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, and it doesn't fit anymore because it's not very open to very much that's happening in your world, well, then your whole spiritual world is closed off. Your spiritual world is shut down, and you spend most of your time just defending it. And I find myself as well as other people often do not have conversations about spirituality. They have postures and defensive conversations. They have, this is what I believe, and don't argue with me and don't disagree with
Right.
me. And if you're on
Mhm.
my side, then we can talk. But if you're not, I can't talk to you. And even then, I'm nervous about it. We're nervous about having this intimate conversation about our spiritual experience because without meaning to, we're often having to feel we have to defend it even when nobody's arguing it. We have to defend it ourselves. So what I wanted to speak to was that inner dialogue that we have that isn't often open and we don't even realize it. So what if everything you believe is just what you believe? And there could be something else that you could believe tomorrow that would be different from that, that would open your universe even more. And what if you allowed for that? And you said, as I remember in our psychology classes years and years ago, and the professor would always say, and it irritated me in the beginning, and then later I became very fond of it. He said, "This is what we know currently. This is the state of our knowledge right now." I wanted absolutes. And what he was saying is, if you have an absolute, then basically you live in a cage. And when you get out of the absolute and you say what we know right now, but I'm available to know more, that means that you have available to you everything you have, but you also have an available future. Some of us don't have an available future because we've already nailed it closed. We've already climbed into the cage and we've said, this is a safe place to be. This is what I'm going to do.
So I also wanted to have this conversation about how do we communicate, because in this time of political really dividedness,
I didn't notice that.
we need a way to communicate with each other that's not I'm right and you're wrong, and it's about time you admitted it. That just doesn't work, and neither does just totally being passive and just wanting to avoid the whole situation, which is what I do. Uh, I will talk with like-minded people, but I don't like to talk with people who disagree with me because it gets so emotional. It gets so well, very quickly, it gets very bombastic, you know. And so I wanted to think about, well, how could I talk with loved ones who disagree with me in a way that I honor them? I honor that they're not stupid people. They're very smart people. How can I inquire and inquire into what they think and why, and listen and respect, and still choose to differ in my opinion, or even better, give my opinion of what I see as the situation, and I really can see that that's what we need to do. We need to not pull back and isolate, because then we become just two camps. We probably should have more than two parties, so we wouldn't be so polarized. But since we do have two parties, if we could engage and start first of all by honoring the other
Hmm.
person as also a divine expression of God, and they have their opinions because of where they live and what is largely believed around them, what their challenges are, what their financial and um, circumstantial challenges are, what they experience. So we need to open up those lines of communication and speak. I just wanted to say, for example, for me, it was I was incredulous that the attack happened on the Capitol. I was really shocked, and yet I've had to think about it this week. I thought, if I believed that the election had been stolen from my candidate, would I not have been just as upset? Would I not have wanted to storm the Capitol if I really believed it had been stolen? And I think I would have. I'm not sure I would have gone, but I would have wanted to. And that helps me understand some of what's going on. I think going forward and communicating, I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. We need honest communication from our leaders too. We can't have two truths. We can't have two stories. There's only one truth. And I believe that's forthcoming. That's what I'm hearing from our medical people about the pandemic, and they're just so relieved that there's not going to be a byline, a storyline, but there is only going to be honest communication and scientific research.
Well, and facts don't change, but they do appear to change when we have more and more information.
Mm,
And so a story changes when we understand its origin, when we understand its nature, when we understand how it's put together. And often what we have are short stories that have a beginning that we didn't hear, or that have more information or more parts to them than we've listened to. And so I think what we could say is, this is what I know, this is what I believe. I'm open to knowing more, and I'm open to believing differently if more information comes, as opposed to, this is what I believe and I got to be right and I can't change. And if I do change, then I'll be disowned by my people. And as a result of that, I have to hold on to this even when I know it's not true. So our need to belong often outweighs our need to be intelligent and reasonable, and to reason. And it's not easy for us to do that. So we're walking in an interesting territory these days. But I want to go back to, because this is not a political conversation, that the politics of our spirituality are the same thing. That we
they
often
are.
hold on to. How many people get uncomfortable when God is referred to as a woman as opposed to a man? How many
Mhm.
people are uncomfortable when God is referred to as a man?
Mhm.
Uh, God is not likely a person that looks a lot like me or looks a lot like Judith. God is more likely a divine intelligence. Well, how many people are irritated by the idea of God as a divine intelligence when God died on the cross, but not really? And so when we have these fixed ideas that we don't even realize we have, that have a lot of comfort, they give us a lot of comfort, then we're not as open to, wow, that's an idea that I've had for 50, 60, 70 years. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're having to, or we don't have to, but if we want to grow spiritually, we're going to have to be willing to look at our spiritual life by opening it up and saying, is this true anymore? Is what I believe, does it make sense? And if it doesn't, then where could I go and how could I find out more? As opposed to, well, that's what it says and that's what I got to believe. And I'm sorry, I'm
Mhm.
stuck with it, but that's just pretty
Mhm.
much it. And that's been my argument with some religious perspectives have been, which is, if it says this is all there is, don't question it. And I remember when I stopped being a Lutheran many, many years ago, I had trouble being a Lutheran, not because of the theology, but because I was being told whenever I asked a question, it was a question that couldn't be answered. I had to leave it alone and simply accept it on faith alone. And I thought, wow, your spirituality has to be something you can constantly question. And in fact, that constant questioning, that constant inquiry is what enriches your spirituality. And, we don't need spiritual clones. We need spiritual inquirers, people who
Mhm.
are spiritually awakening.
This is true. And it is, religion is one of the hardest things to communicate about because those are closely held beliefs. And we don't try to proselytize. We don't try to convert people. We believe that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Hmm.
So when you're ready, you find uh, what's right for you if you're a seeker. So we honor all seekers. We honor everyone for exactly where they are. They're exactly where they need to be right now on the path. And you don't have to engage in communication with them if it disturbs you. But we want to just be sure that we're communicating with the people in a way that honors them.
An example of this process occurred to me as we were talking earlier. We have allergies very often, and an allergy is very often an inappropriate immune response. That is, the immune system responds to overreacts to something. And
It reacts to a pollen
you know,
or whatnot
and
as
so
if it were
it treats it as if it were a disease or
an
as if it were an
invader.
invader, and it's not. And so the sickness we have when we have this allergic reaction is a self-imposed sickness. And I'm thinking, we have a lot of allergies to conversations and people's comments and thoughts and ideas. And the sickness we feel is not them, it's us. We make
We're
ourselves
overreacting.
we make ourselves sick by being so disagreeable at that level of this. I'm listening carefully to see if this rubs any of my beliefs the wrong way. And if it does, you're out of my life. And so we have this allergic listening and we're waiting for the allergen. And as soon as that allergen shows up, oh my God, I knew you were going to say that. I knew that. I thought you might believe that. Now that I know what you believe, I'm going to have my allergic reaction, which is I can't be near you. I can't talk to you. I can't hear anything you have to say. But it operates very much like an allergy.
You're right. It definitely does. So, do you want to show people where they can make a donation to
Oh,
our
yes.
center if they'd like to?
Yes. For those of you that would like to support us, and we would love to be supported by you because we are not for profit 501c3 Center for Spiritual Living, you can go to this website and there is a place that shows you how to donate. And if you live in, I'm not sure where it was now that you won $1 billion.
I won one
No,
billion dollars.
the person who won $1 billion.
Oh, I think it was
Yeah, in
Delaware.
Delaware. If you're listening in Delaware, just mentioning, you can donate a million or two. It's okay.
Someone won the lottery last
Yeah, yeah,
week.
a
Yes,
billion-dollar winner.
right.
Imagine what
And
that.
didn't wasn't there a second $1 billion winner?
I don't know,
That's
but
just
just imagine what would happen in your what you would think differently on how your life would be the morning you wake up with $1 billion in your pocket. And what I thought about when I thought about that was not having $1 billion, but how many things were true yesterday that aren't true today? How many things you would do today that you wouldn't have done ever in your life? It's like, wow, this is so maybe this next week, what you could do is imagine that you're all billionaires and proceed during your life like you are and see how that works.
Yeah, really, really. So if you have any questions about communication, it makes it for a great workshop, actually. There's
Yeah.
really a lot to be learned, and there are a lot of techniques. And I know one thing that's being promoted right now is compassionate listening. And I'm sure that's a wonderful program. What I read about it is that it teaches you not just to hear what people say, but to get what they're not saying.
Mhm.
That's a very important part of communicating. Also, is
Well, the first
not
step,
just the words, but the expressions, the body language, circumstances.
the first step is even being willing to consider that your way of communicating could be improved or changed
Mm,
or made better. Compassionate listening is an extraordinary process because most of us don't even realize that a lot of the time we're not listening. Yeah. So,
So let's close with a spiritual mind
and
treatment.
then for those of you that are watching today, we will hang on and have a an animated conversation for probably close to a half an hour or more.
Yeah, where we really appreciate your input. So let's close our eyes, go within, and know that there's one power, one presence, or one source of all life. It is everywhere present. It is within and is the essence of each one of us. We know that it gives us intelligence. It gives us the ability to communicate with one another. The most important ingredient of our communication is sharing our love and our care and our concern for others, that we are willing and able to share our ideas assertively and listen to theirs assertively. For we know that no one is on a higher hierarchy than we are in this level of human beings. So we give thanks for understanding. We give thanks for knowing. We give thanks for stepping out and trying things we haven't done before. We know that we are emboldened by knowing each one of us is a divine expression of God. We give thanks, we release, and together we say,
And so it
and
is.
so it is.